Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Lugo's Journey podcast. Today, I have an absolutely incredible guest today. She is honestly, so I'm going to do the intro for her because I know that she's too humble to actually do it herself. So, at the age of 15, she wrote an article that received a national acclaim from Scholastic, and then she ended up doing it again at the age of 17, which is absolutely incredible. And then she went into college, became an absolutely transformative person, and also went through a tremendous amount of struggle, but then went on studying abroad and traveled to around 25 countries. And by the time that she was done, she has now written a book that is called 21 Years Young, that is coming out in December of 2020. And I think everybody is excited to hear her story. So, Amy, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Wow, that was such a nice introduction. I don't think I could have done it better myself.
Well, I think we are all interested in hearing your story and everything about you. So I think you should start from the beginning and just tell, just a little basic intro of just who you are, how you became to become the person who you are, and everything like that.
Yeah, wow. Well, I definitely don't want to bore anyone with just the entire life story, but I would say that a few things about me are I've had a really, really supportive family. So I think the majority of my growing up has been sort of cultured and nurtured and shaped by what my family has taught me. I went to a private school called St. John's School when I was in middle school and high school. My English teachers there really, really shaped my love for English. So that sort of naturally led me to want to write a book at some point. And then Eric Custer of the Creator Institute reached out and he was like, "Do you want to write a book?" And I was like, "Hell yeah, I want to write a book. This has been my dream for so many years. And I finally feel like I have something to write about." So Nick, you mentioned, I ended up having a transformative time in college, and I would definitely say that was the case. I did indeed travel to 5 continents and 25 countries during my time there, across 2 different study abroad semesters, the first in Europe and the second in Southeast Asia. And I also did struggle a lot. I was diagnosed with an eating disorder when I was a sophomore in college, and my physician told me at the time that I was lucky to be alive and that I actually shouldn't even be in college to focus on recovery. So I spent a gap semester after my first semester abroad in Prague. And at the end of the day, I ended up spending only about 2 years of college actually in New York City, which was another crazy story on its own. And the other 2, just reading dozens of books, journaling, writing on my blog, and trying to figure out the person I was becoming and the person I wanted to be. And that is actually a lot of what my book is about too. It's just the unexpected nature of growing up and what all that encompasses.
Wow. So when you were around 15, you actually, apparently got very into writing, so good that you actually, became nationally recognized for it. Explain what that experience was like and also how you got into writing so much. Why are you so passionate about
Yeah, that's such a great question. So I'll start with the second question first. Why is writing so important to me? It's like my therapy. It's like my personal therapist, and I'm sort of talking to myself. I am a very neurotic and type A person, so sometimes I struggle with living in the present. And I'm always like, okay, what do I have to do next? What's next on my plate? But writing is definitely that tool that I use to focus on myself and sort of reflect on everything that's happening around me and why I feel certain ways. As for the first part and how I got into writing so early on, definitely was because of my St. John's teachers, Miss Carswell, Miss Weinstein, Dr. Rawson. They were transformative in getting me to think about writing as a tool for expressing myself. So even though, when we were in middle school and high school, it was all about, those 5-paragraph essays and like analyzing some book. But it ended up being a way for me to write very personal stories about myself too. So when I did receive those national awards from Scholastic, one was a critical essay on disaster culture in America, because I was really interested in that at the time. And the other one was a personal memoir about my sister, my relationship with my older sister. And yeah, wow, that acclaim, I think, was a very big motivating factor. It was almost like external proof that I wasn't just a person who thought I wanted to write and maybe could. It was sort of like, hey, we as a group recognize that you have a lot of potential and that you should continue exploring this. And then when my disaster essay was published in an anthology, I was like, okay, this is definitely something that my family never saw coming, that I could potentially be a writer, but let me explore this more. So it was really just a nudge into my wanting to use writing to express myself more. And I definitely realized like also how lucky I was to receive that kind of recognition. I definitely was not the only one who deserved it. So this whole time I've just felt really, really grateful and really lucky in so many different ways to be where I am now.
Yeah, I think that's so awesome. I think so. There is actually so the reason why this podcast is called the Lugo's Journey podcast, I don't think I told you this, is because it is based off of stories in general, right? And your book is just a collection of stories that create an entire person. And the whole purpose of that, and I haven't read your book yet because it's coming out in December, but literally the entire purpose of stories and these adventure type stories is to create a hero, right? Like a hero's journey is that archetype that everyone knows about. It's in the Disney movies, it's in, it's in Star Wars, it's in pretty much every single story that we know of. And, part of being a hero, and that's why it's called Lugo's Journey, it's the hero's journey. When part of being a hero is that you go through this sort of transformation stage as you're younger, like growing up, and part of it is actually showing an initial form of strength, right? Showing some initial form of, okay, I am very talented and I could go very far, but I have to go through all these trials and tribulations and all these struggles that will eventually bring me from a process of immaturity, which is like obviously like high school, into a process of maturity. And I think that's what your book is about, a large part of it. So I think the next step and what we have to talk about is those trials and tribulations. What were the things that sort of got in your way of finding the meaningful, fulfilling life that you feel like you're pursuing at the age of 21?
Wow. Yeah, I loved hearing that sort of journey and how you came across the podcast idea to show like the hero archetype. I think that is so incredibly true. My entire note from the author is about the power of storytelling. And for me, personal essayists are such heroes for me because they're so vulnerable. It's not the traditional hero stereotype where they're very confident, they get knocked down, but they still have that grit to them. It's a lot about vulnerability and knowing that real life isn't heaven. So you should not be pretending to be some angel. You should be talking about your feelings like devastation, like grief or depression or pettiness even. One of my favorite authors is David Sedaris, and he is the king of being petty, but doing it in a way that makes you just love his stories and just fall in love with his character. So for me, I was actually just revising an essay in my upcoming book called Had I Gone to Harvard. And this is a little bit more of a stereotype in the sense that I'm Chinese American. My parents are immigrants, and my older sister went to Harvard. She graduated Phi Beta Kappa, incredible woman. And when I was applying for college, my parents just saw me doing the exact same thing she was doing. But not only did I get rejected from Harvard, I got rejected from like every possible like Ivy League, any sort of good school that a lot of Asian communities sort of look to. And in my heart of hearts, I didn't care that I was going to these colleges. Like I thought it was a sham, that there's so much pressure being put on it. And I ended up at NYU, which at the time was my last choice college, which was horrible because it's I felt like a horrible human being because that's people's dream school. Like I don't know, like there was something in my mind that was like, someone has made me think that I shouldn't want to go here. And that was almost the first failure, the first true failure in my life that I didn't think was at all because I thought I had made a mistake. It was much more like, why do I feel like this is a mistake? And let's just see, because it's probably not going to be one. And if I were going to be really honest, it was probably the best mistake of my life. I know that, or I hope I don't come across as this very privileged brat who just wanted to get into Harvard. But that's how I felt at the time. I was like, what am I, what is my purpose if this is how I'm feeling? But I guess the trial was just telling myself that, hey, the most unexpected things are often the most meaningful, because you really have to dig into yourself and find out what the truth of the scenario is. And the truth was, no one knows what it's like to go to any school in college unless you actually go to it. And for me, that the only way I could have traveled so much, the only way I could be the person I am now, is by going through exactly what came before. And when I'm reading books about, mental illnesses or physical illnesses, even things like cancer or death, the writers in it definitely showcase grief, but another thing they always showcase is the gratitude for what it's made them feel, and also the sort of hope that it gives them to know that this is not the end. And that is how I always feel. Like, even when I'm at my lowest point, I know that I know that I want to have a purpose that is worth sacrificing for, and I definitely have the people worth living for. And those two ingredients, sort of having this purpose outside of yourself, and then also having that support system of really, really close family or friends, I think that's all that's needed to make a good life. So everything that comes in the middle is just sort of extra sprinkles on your cupcake. That was a horrible analogy, but yes.
No, I completely agree though. So actually, what do you think is your purpose, right? What do you think is your actual reason for being here?
Yeah, okay, so to the way I want to describe this, everyone always asks, oh, this goes perfectly along with your superhero analogy, but there's always the question of, if you could have one superpower in the world, what would it be?
Yeah.
And at one point I was playing this game with my friends where we were like, you can't do anything cliche. Like, you can't say you want to fly or that you want to turn invisible. It has to be something really, really weird and very distinct, so that you're probably the only one who has this thought. And I had recently watched this China's Got Talent singing competition where this kid came on stage and said, my 梦想, or my dream, is to have this ink that turns the whole world green with grass, because he was from the Mongolian grasslands and he loved the idea of like having freedom through a green world. And I was like, that is such a beautiful thing. And I realized the one thing that I love most is making people that I love feel really loved or just feel happy. So my superhero power that I would want to have, if I could have it, is the ability to just touch someone. And it has to be like a physical touch. It can't just be a thought, like a poke, that would make them instantly feel warm and fuzzy inside. So I know before this podcast started, I mentioned potentially wanting to go into teaching or into motivational speaking. And that is because, number one, I think the coolest job in the world is to get paid for talking, because I love talking. And second, because I love the feeling of making someone happy, or inspiring someone in a one-on-one setting or in a small group setting. So not something a philanthropist necessarily does, and which is why I'm thinking more along the lines of teaching or speaking for small groups.
Interesting. So is that what you're trying to go through with your book? You're trying to actually show people, this is what I went through. Here are the trials and tribulations that I went through, and here's how you could come out of it. Here's how you could become inspired by my story.
Yeah, I would definitely say it's definitely the former, where I'm explaining what the hell I just went through as a 21-year-old. But I don't claim to have all the answers. I think that's the important part. I'm never going to be the one that will help anyone else fix their own problems. But I think I just want to say, like, everyone has problems. I have problems, and it's totally okay to have them. It's natural. It's good to have those. And one thing that I think is different about my collection of personal essays to a lot of other more famous or more well-known ones is that I'm writing from a point of confusion, from a point of youth. A lot of people write reflections on what has happened long ago in the past, hindsight 2020. But because I'm living in a lot of that confusion right now, I'm really just exploring, what is the important and the urgent and essential message that I feel right now that is important, and whoever reads it can do whatever they want with it. If it inspires them, that's awesome. Like of course I would, that is the dream. But I definitely don't claim to say, if you do exactly what I did, you will have a good life.
Well, of course, I think everyone goes to their own story, but at the same time, there's that sort of development that comes through. I'm assuming that you start your book from a time when you're at a very young age, and you go through an absolute personal transformation, right? So, what do you think was actually the thing that in your life gave you that like incredible transformation? Like, I am now growing up and turning into the person that I'm going to become.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really good one. I would say that the first one was probably when my sister left for college and I was the only kid left in the household. And I finally realized that I did not need to be comparing myself to someone like her every step of the way. I, growing up, I did exactly what my sister did. And I would work my butt off to beat her almost in a sense. I feel like every sibling story has this
I
sort of
went through the
dynamic.
same
Yeah,
thing.
but as soon as she left, I was like, oh my God, I am not her. I am my own person. It's a cliche, but cliches are cliches because they are true. So that was definitely the first point where I was like, oh, I don't really like science. I like history and English. And, I'm not, she's a little bit more introverted on the shyer side. And I was like, I'm actually really loud and I want to see how, I want to see how my extroversion makes me different, makes me unique. And the second one I mentioned earlier was definitely the first biggest failure of my life that did not end up being a failure at all, which was going to NYU. Now I'm just so incredibly grateful to have graduated from NYU. I feel very lucky. I would say I'm actually very grateful for all the colleges who said no to me because that led to one of the best yeses that I've ever heard. And then the third and probably most important for me now has been my struggle with and my diagnosis of and my recovery for my eating disorder. I had been struggling with it ever since junior year of high school. And I was just so good at convincing everyone that I was totally fine when I clearly was not. And now I feel a lot less apologetic about feeling things like anxiety or any sort of mental stigma. I no longer really have. So those three, I would say, make up my life now. Just family, failures that don't end up being failures, and the sort of daily mental struggle that I have that I actually think is very meaningful in the end.
Interesting. So during your eating disorder, did you actually find that you, even though you're a very, very introspective person, from what I could tell, because you write all the time, but at the same time, did you find that you sort of denied it from yourself and you sort of like pushed it away?
Absolutely. I think that was the biggest part of it. As sort of this type A person, I really wanted control over everything, and that included my body. I convinced myself that losing 20 pounds in like a very short amount of time was normal. I convinced myself that just I don't know how detailed you want me to get here, but there were a lot
Get
of
as
really
detailed
gross
as you
things.
want. Yeah.
Yeah, there were a lot of really weird things happening to my body. One was that I was freezing all the time. Another one was that I would sort of have this acid reflux of things coming up and I was just like, oh, this is all normal. Like, this is totally fine. And nothing about that was fine. When I look back at old photos, I thought I was still so incredibly fat, but I looked like a twig. And there was probably, my sister was like, Amy, you feel like a skeleton that I could snap. I did not appreciate that commentary at the time, but then I spent 2 months regaining 20 pounds and I was like,
Wow.
I must look like a whale. And I went back to school the next semester and everyone was like, wow, Amy, you sound a lot calmer and much more mature and happier. And you just look happier. No one commented about my weight. And I was like, wow, it was all in my head. So yes, it was definitely a realization that the biggest critic of your life will always be yourself.
Yeah.
And that if you can fight that voice, if you can work with it, and if you can and learn to love it, then you really don't have to worry about like any other critics.
It's true because like you're I mean for all of us, right? Like we're like the center of our own stories essentially, right? Like we're perceiving everything through us. So I could understand how like yeah, in your life you're like, all right, everyone's focused on me. Everyone, really looks at me and judges me at every single point. But I agree, like I don't think I don't think we're that important. And I think it's really cool how you've sort of even throughout like your years, I think it's important that you went from like really focused and stressed about what other people think of you to still caring about whatever people think about you, but now you're still humble about it. Now you're just like, you know what, if they think this thing about me, it's all right, it's whatever.
Oh my gosh, yeah, you put it so much better. It's you think you're the center of the universe, and then you realize no one cares about you as much as you think they do. And that was probably the biggest revelation I had with my eating disorder. It's just, wow, it's so great that no one really cares as much as I think they do, because everyone is this, you're right, everyone is the center of their own story. So of course they're going to be thinking much more about how people perceive themselves and how they're perceiving me.
That's so awesome. I think that's one of the most incredible realizations because it's like, we are not that important. We really aren't. But at the same time, we're all contributing to that same good and we're all doing that one, we're all adding to a better sense of, like all of our loved ones really care about us. And there's this sense of like balancing, everyone really cares about me, but people don't care about me that much.
Yes, exactly. Very well put.
So I did want to switch gears and I wanted to talk about your time at NYU and sort of like the time where you pushed on and you really started to discover yourself even more. So first of all, you were a Fulbright scholar, which is absolutely incredible. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I would love for you to talk about that. And I'd also love for you to talk about how what your experience was like when you traveled to 25 different countries on your semesters abroad and learned probably so much, and I definitely want to hear about all.
Yeah, I'll go in order. So for the Fulbright scholarship, I applied for that this past year with the understanding that it would give me another year to just explore myself. There's I definitely have my reservations about doing any sort of fellowship that claims that they're really, really helping the people that you're going to teach. So I'll be teaching English in Taiwan. And yes, I'll get to be working with kids and hopefully I leave some sort of impression on their lives. But really, I think any scholarship is how it affects myself. And it definitely is a more of a selfish lens, but I think you just have to look at it like that when the entire point of my applying is really, how is this going to change my reason for being? How is this going to move me forward? And as I said to you earlier, I am considering teaching, and I absolutely love English. I'm such good friends with a lot of my old English teachers. We text all the time, and I'm like, if I love English and if I love teaching, or if I think I like teaching, then let me just apply for something that will let me do both of them together. And I did choose Taiwan because I wanted to work on my own Mandarin skills. It's definitely very close to me culturally. And I just visited this past year when I was studying abroad, and I absolutely loved it, and I cannot wait to be back. If COVID doesn't affect any of that, because I have no idea. We never know what's going to happen. And then as for traveling, wow, I hated traveling as a kid. I was that person who was like, I just want to be home in my own bed, eating my own food, not walking around all the time because I'm a lazy bum. And college completely changed that for me. After the eating, or especially because of the eating disorder, I was like, I never know how much time I'm going to have left. And one of the coolest things about travel is, yes, you get to explore someone else's culture. But again, because our stories are always in the end about ourselves, it's really, how do I see a new place? And how am I inserting my own memories, my own past, my own identity into the little niches that I discover? So when I was in Singapore, for example, one of the essays that I ended up writing about my book was about when I went to one of the really famous hawker centers to eat oyster omelets. I had no idea what an oyster omelet.
Easter.
I had no idea those things even existed, but apparently it's just something that all the locals love, and now because of that, all the tourists love. And in that moment, I was just fully cognizant of the fact that I was a complete stranger in someone else's world. No one there knew who I was. No one cared. But that was a very freeing feeling. It made me feel like there were no judgments to be passed. I was also free to do whatever I wanted as long as it was within the bounds of, social etiquette. And there was just such a lack of anxiety or feeling like I needed to be doing something. And I will always want to chase that feeling of just joy about feeling content in someone else's world, because we usually only want the comfort of our own. And then in Europe, I realized what not to do, which includes traveling to a different country every weekend on like 1 hour of sleep. I know this, well, this one time I also traveling with the right people. So there was this one trip that I took. I ended up going with people that I didn't know so well, which is fine, except for the fact that they made us drive to a different country to get Taco Bell, because they really, really wanted Taco Bell in the middle of Belgium. So we ended up driving all the way to the Netherlands with our rented cars. And I was like, this is going to be the best story I ever tell one day, but it's also like, what in the world am I doing? So once again, it was using a foreign place to really better understand myself. And some of the other places I went to were actually for class trips. So I took many courses that allowed me to travel. One was a sustainable sort of entrepreneurship course that actually took me to Ghana, because NYU Stern has this 10-year partnership with this wonderful village there that we work with every single year. And it's just been an incredible journey to see them go from a place with like no latrines and a really makeshift school and no business to now they have their own sustainable farming practices. We help them set up a clean water business. They're doing a boutique fashion business that is also now on Etsy. So it's really awesome to be able to go somewhere and have an impact on people at maybe not as much as they've impacted you, but knowing that I wasn't just a volunteerist and doing something that gives back.
Yeah. Well, how do you found that? So over that time, how did you find that it actually changed yourself, right? So you said that when your sister left, that you developed a sort of independence, right? You sort of came into yourself. So how do you feel like when you physically, instead of just like your sister leaving, you left your entire country, how do you feel like that, shifted your independence and how you felt about yourself?
Yeah, wow, fantastic question. I think it's always so much more independence once you just kick yourself out of your own home.
Yeah.
The initial choice to do that is already like kudos to whoever chooses to ever leave their own country and just go see something else. It's just so different. And you definitely get a sense of independence if you ever do solo traveling. I took a solo trip to Slovenia, and I ended up befriending an Italian and a Singaporean journalist while I was there. And I was like, okay, like I don't need anyone that I know to still have a semblance of belonging or to enjoy life, which is a very astonishing realization for someone like me who loves being with someone that I know or thought I loved that. And yeah, just being able to make your own decisions to also get yourself out of really strange situations. For example, I had my wallet stolen 3 different times when I was in Europe, and by the end of it, I was just like, I'm going to be so good at dealing with pickpockets in the future. Like, it will never happen again, even though it probably will. But yeah, it's just dealing with yourself. Most of it is always just dealing with yourself and learning what you like, the kind of people you like, the kind of places you enjoy. And yeah, that all ends up bringing about this sense of independence for sure.
That's awesome. No, I think actually, now that you sort of left your home, it's a very, actually, this is something I did want to touch base with you because I think this is so interesting. So when you became an independent person, right, you became essentially like a hero in your own story, right? Like you become your own person, and you essentially, you do the things that you want to do, and you're now independent. But you did have an essay, which I thought was actually incredible, which was about the sort of the how we sort of overreact to the news, or how the news itself is incredibly, focused on gaining your attention. And when they focus on gaining your attention, they focus on the danger part of it, right? The sort of
Right.
survival element that we have, which is like, when you look in the news, you're not going to see like, this normal person did a normally good thing and opened the door for somebody. It's this murder happened or this bad thing happened, and it's supposed to arouse your emotion. So do you find that people like that, who never really gain their independence of thought, like who never really think for themselves and are just kind of like following the media, do you think it has that big of an effect on like an individual person and also like society in general?
Yeah, there's so many elements to what you just said. I think well, first, I definitely understand why media does what it does. Media is just, it's a business, and to get customers tend to like sensationalized things, and myself included. And from an amazing English teacher of mine from high school, she just told me in our creative writing course, a perfect day makes for a shitty story. You're right. Like you don't want to hear me talk about how I woke up early in the morning, I did my dance, ballet, whatever, and then I got a great breakfast, and then everything went smoothly. No, like I wouldn't want to read that. So of course, I can definitely see why media does that. At the same time, I'm very much a Black Mirror fanatic, and I'm terrified of what technology
Yeah.
can sometimes do. And it is very terrifying to me, and I don't think I can emphasize enough how scared I am when all these echo chambers form, and we end up digesting only the things that sort of is curated for us because people know that from whatever we're clicking that we enjoy seeing. I honestly think the best thing to do is just shut off media for a while and go see something for yourself. For example, I'm from Texas, and a lot of my New York friends were talking really bad things about how, oh my gosh, I know that Texans are like all the stereotypes, and I'm like, well, you might see that on the news, but if you actually came over and stayed with me for a
Yeah.
while, you would know that my neighbor, who is like a gun-toting, barbecue grilling like person with tattoos, who you think is probably some horrible person, he's the one who helped all of my neighbors like carry out their things when Hurricane Harvey hit. He's the one who rescued the cats and like canoed down the river to send groceries to someone. So it is my personal belief that we should much more trust things that we see with our own eyes, than anything we read on the news. People for centuries lived without any of that stuff, and they got along just fine. So this is also why people call me a grandma. I'm not I'm not the biggest fan of media.
No, I mean, I completely get it, because I feel like, don't you think it just makes you happier, right? If you're just like not focusing on all the things that are terrible in the world, then you're just gonna focus in your life, and you're gonna focus on the good things that are going on, the
Yes,
99% of good things that are happening, instead of the 1% that are bad that get sensationalized, and you start to
exactly.
feel like, oh yeah, I'm a happier person.
Exactly. That is so, so true. And, I feel like a lot of my friends and I, we sometimes feel selfish for turning off media, like, oh, we should be caring about what's going on. But another favorite quote of mine is from Kurt Vonnegut's book Cat's Cradle, and he says, in this messy world, we were at least trying to keep our own corners clean. And I think that is such a beautifully put phrase, because the world will always be messy. Like there will always be something going wrong. But the most important thing to do is to make sure you yourself are right, like you are functioning, you are healthy. Because if you can't even keep your own corner clean and your own life clean, then there is no way you can begin cleaning up someone else's mess. So that is sort of
Right.
my life motto, in the sense that if I'm feeling anxious about reading the news, then I'm turning off the news and I'm working on my own feelings first. And that's just sort of how I would advise anyone to do. Yeah.
I find that so interesting. Yeah, I mean, there was, you know, you have even just like Gandhi himself, right? Like he was very focused on the political change that he can make and all that stuff. But again, he's just like, you know what? Be the change you wish to see in the world, right? Like if hypothetically, because we know this will never happen, but it's the right direction. If every single person followed that mentality, then it's like then we have a great world, right? Where everybody's really focused on themselves. That's sort of like man in the mirror mentality, where you're literally just sitting there and you're like, you know what, I'm focusing on me. I'm focusing on the person that I wish to be. And if I make myself a better person, if I focus on the things that I can control, and I can make this world a better place.
Yes. Wow. I wonder if I would like to see this hypothetical world for a day. That sounds very lovely.
Me too. But there was this one philosophy, and I believe that this to be true, and it scares me. It was Dostoevsky. He actually said that, I forget which book it was in, but he said that when if we hypothetically achieve like a perfect world, like a world where like there's not like the 99% of people that are good and then the 1% of people that are bad. It's like everybody's good and nobody has any problems. It's like he said, like the first thing that humans would do is tear it to shreds just to see some action, just to see something happening.
Mm,
It's
yep.
interesting. So I'm like, you know what? Even though there's going to be problems, and you said like there's always going to be problems. It's like you could keep focusing on the problems that you could definitely have an effect on. But at the same time, if you keep focusing on the problems, there's never going to be any solution because humans are going to keep creating problems.
Exactly. Oh, I I'm in full belief that that is also what would happen. They're just you can't there's literally no such thing as perfection without imperfection, and that's like every dichotomy. I know the world is not just like good or bad. I That dichotomy is definitely a trope that's used way too often, but you're
Yeah.
right, and Duskafe was right. You can't. I really do not think there is such thing as like total perfection, and that's great because it means there's always something that you can work for.
Yeah, it's true. I think, that's the whole purpose of the hero myth and also just humans in general. It's like, I think the thing that humans do best is that we like to solve problems, right? We like to understand, okay, here's the things that are going wrong and here's what I could do to fix them. And here's the goal that I could pursue, right? Because if at all, right, we're trying to pursue just more and more goals and to be more and more fulfilled by achieving those goals. And that's what gives our life meaning. But at the same time, it's like, how are you supposed to do that if life is perfect, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
So now that we're trying to do something and pursue this sort of like meaningful, incredible thing, right? If we actually achieve that thing, then there are going to be no more goals.
Right. Isn't that such an interesting concept? I Something that my sister once told me was really awesome, and she was like, Amy, I think I don't ever want to achieve like my ultimate life goal, because then life would just be really boring and I'd be sulking all the time and I would force myself to find something new. And one of my best friends from middle school, she told me the other week, like, Amy, I told my little campers the other week that if you can achieve all your goals and you aren't setting them high enough. And that's like another one of those cliches that it's often said to motivate people. But if we bring that to its biggest extreme, and you said that, okay, even if the goals were high, I achieved them, then what is next? And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
No, it's true. I was actually talking to my uncle about this because my parents are actually considering, we're in New Jersey right now, or they are, right? I'm in Indiana, but they want to move down to North Carolina when
Mm.
they're, retired, and they want to have like that relaxing lifestyle of living on the beach and all that wonderful jazz. And I was talking to my uncle about it because he's very against it. And he said something that was interesting. He goes, if you're doing that, then you're essentially just waiting for the bus, right? That's all that you're doing. Because really, like, right, if you're living and you're not pursuing anything or you're not doing anything to feel alive, you're essentially just living there dead, waiting for death to actually come and take you.
Wow. Yeah. No, yeah, that's a not so like a lack of euphemism there, but no, I agree. I agree. It's just the truth.
That's true.
Yeah. It's the cold hard
Yeah.
truth.
No, it's true. I think Aristotle actually said this. He said that it's better for humans to never achieve their goals, which is so sad, but it's true, right? It's better for humans to never achieve their goals because then they have something always to strive for, something always to do.
Oh, that's so wow. Aristotle always coming in with the punches. Yeah.
Always does.
What a horrible way to put something that's probably true.
Probably true. I know. I'm still trying to figure that out. But at the same time, I do find that people nowadays they strive for this feeling of, I just want to relax and I just want to hang out. And I think that's sort of a rejection of, this very hyper individualistic capitalist society that we have right now. It's very, like we've made it so workhorse heavy that, people are working to the point where they hate their jobs. 85% of people hate their jobs, by the way, which is incredibly scary. And if people are hating their jobs, they're thinking, oh yeah, if I hate my job, then what should I do? I think the best thing for me is relax. But the only thing is, if you relax, then you can only relax for so long, right? Like after a while, you're just going to be absolutely miserable because you're not actually pursuing something important. So there was actually this quote, I forget what it was. I forget who said it, but they said it was like, the worst mistake that any humans have made in this last century is that believing that the goal of life is comfort.
Mm.
And I completely agree with that because it's like, if you're comfortable, then you're just going to be sitting there. You're going to have 3 great months of being absolutely comfortable. And then you're just going to believe what's next.
Yeah, that's something I think about all the time. One of my biggest concerns for life is that because I tend to, I think I'm above average in terms of, not that above average is better. I think it's worse, but the people who can't sit still and always have to be moving towards something better.
Same.
I actually wish, right? It's I mean, we're both doing this crazy book program. I mean, that's definitely one sign of it, but I wish I could be the person who found comfort in something for the longest time possible and just stretch it out. But this is always, I mean, it's why people are always like, after you make that 75K salary a year, the more you make, it doesn't actually have that big of an impact on your happiness. And that's the core reason. Like you can be content for a little bit, but then you'll always want something more. So if you can just set yourself a limit and say, I don't care above a certain threshold, I feel like that actually frees you to go spend your time doing other things. It's all, I mean, I went to business school and I feel like so many of my friends are now being held in the hypothetical like golden handcuffs, which is, they're making so much more money than I probably ever will. But all right, I don't know if they're happy because they're handcuffed to the idea that they always have to get more. But like, what is the end goal, right? Like we'll all die someday.
Yeah, and the money doesn't come with you to the grave, right? So
Right.
I think that's tough because you have the people who, I'm personally a believer. Okay, this is my personal belief, and this is something that I'm actually an incredible fan of. That we don't do things because we want to sort of we don't do things because it makes us feel, important, or, we don't do things because we're sort of achieving a goal. I think that's part of it. But I think more of it is just we're looking for what makes us feel alive and what makes us feel like we're actually contributing something to the world, and that, what we're doing actually makes us sort of feel like we're still doing things, right? Like sort of like we're the opposite of that boring, mundane life. I think the worst thing that people want to have is this sort of mundane life. So I think when you're constantly striving for something, especially like money, right? Even though it's like that sort of golden handcuffs, it's like even if you take the handcuffs off, it's like you're still going to have to do something else. And I think that's the problem.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful way of putting it, Nick. I actually don't think I've ever thought about it like that, but you're right. It's if you're alive, then the quintessential point of being alive is almost to like prove either to yourself or to someone that you care about that you are indeed alive. And
Yeah.
to live is sort of to embody all of that. And that I definitely do think that we are also writing these books to prove to ourselves that we exist in the word form. And
Definitely.
as you know, I'm sure you've thought about this, but like once we die, our words will stay behind, and that is the promise that we are told will be fulfilled, if we do publish, and even if we don't, even if it's just a manuscript that we leave in some online archive somewhere, like it's our words.
And we're alive through them, right? Like that's
Exactly.
literally what we're pushing through, and that's why we feel alive. I think
Exactly.
that's usually what ends up happening though. Like you sort of see it, you see it play out. I think from the time from when you're like 20 to by the time when you're like 35-ish, you're very focused on actually like focusing on yourself and being alive. But then essentially once you have a kid, once you have that sort of like essentially like the next goal to pursue, right, which is raising your child, you're living through them, right? So no matter what, I think they said that in Interstellar, I think they said it the best. It's like by the time that you die, most likely the person that's going to be next to you is going to be your kids or your grandkids, because your goal, your last cling of hope to be alive is to be living through those children, right? Like to carry yourself genetically, right? Like there's the whole like Darwin's theory of natural selection, and then you end up literally living through your genetics, but at the same time you're living as a person through them, right? Since you mentor them, hopefully they're going to mentor more people, and essentially you're going to be living through them. And I think that's so important to feel like no matter what, we're always striving for that one thing. And that's just like being alive and really having our impact on the world. And also like the essential feeling inside of us of like, you know what, I'm not dead. Like I'm not bored. I'm doing things that are making me feel excited.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, Interstellar was such a great movie. That's all I that's all I want to say about that.
I know. I just watched it the other day and I thought it was absolutely incredible. What's his name? Christopher Nolan. Just every
Yes.
single movie that he makes, just absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I love everything he does. I wish he could make more.
Me too. Me too. All right. Well, it was great talking to you, and this was an absolutely incredible podcast. I just want to do one more thing, ask you one final question, and I
Yeah.
think this is something. How do people get in touch with you, and also give your pitch on why they should buy 21 Years Young, released in December of 2020?
Absolutely. So if you want to get in touch with me, you can reach me at amy.dong@nyu.edu. You can also find me on Instagram as amydong_writing. And I'm sure you could probably just search me up and I'll be there on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever else you want to use. I'm not on Twitter. But why you should purchase 21 Years Young. If you are my age or if you are a young adult, I think it's a great book that just shows you that you're not alone in your confusion or your thoughts of what the hell am I going to do next in my life? Because that is exactly where I am too. And if you are someone who's older, but just wants a reminder of what it's like to be young and still, terrified, but also very optimistic and just every emotion that you're probably feeling now, but magnified and a little bit more on the naive side, then I would definitely recommend that you order it. Also, if you're trying to figure out how you can relate better to your kids, I've definitely given that pitch to a couple of my friends who are teachers or parents, and they were like, that is an excellent idea. So, for any of those reasons, I would definitely encourage you to order the book when it's out in December. And Nick, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. This was the best start to my morning, and I'm really glad I got to talk to you about all these things. I'm about to write down a bunch of things you told me because I thought they were really brilliant. So, yeah,
Amazing. Amy Dong, thank you so much.
thank you.